We believe that we can change everything in this world. So sometimes we overestimate the result that we can deliver to the clients.
Today, I'm joined with Shengyun Lu, former project manager at Roland Berger, former partner at Simon Kucher, and now an AI venture builder working at the intersection of consulting, value creation, and artificial intelligence.
In order to get a good places in the consulting industry, we need to get a very good preparation around case interviews.
Who should not go into consulting?
And I do have some disappointment for one or two promotions during my cycles within Roland Berger in Paris or in Europe.
When I think about your experience, you need to literally lobby for your promotion. Is that correct?
You have always the most difficult question.
Would you still advise someone to get into consulting?
It's not important that we work longer times per day, like 17 hours. The thing which is very important is if we create, they are hiring ex-McKinsey BCG bank consultants to train the large language models.
Looking back, what was the moment where your career could have gone in a completely different direction?
I grew up in China and I went to France in 2004 and I studied in a French school called Polytechnique. And I was studying mechanical engineering in the school. I was doing a major called automotive in the Chinese university. Once I started my career, the natural way for me to start a career in France was doing the automotive engineering. It was exactly what I was doing. And I didn't start the consulting from day one because of two reasons. First reason was consulting is a very relational based business. So doing good communication is one of the core skills for a consultant. At that time, when I was in France, my French was not perfect to be a consultant. That's one of the reasons. And the second reason is I think in my school, at least my French university, we didn't have so many graduates to the consulting industry. So in order to get a good places in the consulting industry, which was, to be honest, very competitive, I think still it's true for today. We need to get a very good preparation, a lot of exercise around case interviews. That's one of the most important thing if we want to get into the consulting industry. I didn't have a lot of case interviews at that time. That's why actually I tried, but I think from day one, it was not a good choice for me. And after 4 to 5 years in the corporate, and I joined a firm called Roland Berger, a very famous European-based consulting firm. And you see there, the 2 points I mentioned, the first one is language barrier. So I trained myself in French when I started to work 4 to 5 years. And for the case interviews, I got a good preparation before my application for the consulting industry. So around with people from schools or with people who were interested by consulting. And I looked into also a very famous person called Victor. So you know him also. I looked to train myself. So I think these are the key moments, if I say, when I step into the consulting industry. So if you ask me the question, what I should have done differently, I might say that for lots of people, if you think that doing consulting is one of the core interests for you, so start from the day one. That's my personal advice. Because if we start from the day one from the consulting, we are used to the consulting ways of seeing different things, seeing different business. So that's very important. So we get into the way very easily. And the second thing is if you start earlier, you will get longer period of time, in my opinion, in the consulting or staying in the consulting industry because this industry requires a lot of energies from individuals. So if we start younger, we can stay a little bit longer if we enjoy this industry and maybe get promoted to a manager, senior manager, principals, or even partners.
Over the coming months, I'll be working more closely with a small group of candidates as part of my summer 2026 consulting cohort, where we go deeper into this process. It's a more hands-on, longer-term format, typically over a few months, and of course, money back guaranteed if you did not land an offer, and I'm quite selective with who I work with there. So if you're serious about this path, and you want to explore whether it makes sense for you, you can sign up for a short cohort intro call below. You mentioned it requires a bit of energy. What do you mean by energy?
Good point. Firstly, when I was in Roland Berger, I have a very good project manager. I still remember once he told me that consulting is a marathon. It's not. So if you want to do longer time in consulting, you need to know how to manage your level of energies. So what does that mean for energies? There's a one personal energy, meaning that we sometimes need to work longer times in the consulting industry. We always say that average working times maybe 12 or 15 or even longer working hours per day. That is one thing I call that endurance. One is how we put energy into the work with our clients. Sometimes we need to change the way of the client. Sometimes we need to convince the client about one very interesting idea which my client didn't perceive. So we need to put a little bit our energy into the communication and to convince the people. This is one of energy. That's why a lot of consultants, after the work of interviewing clients, they get very tired. The second thing is we need energy. We need to put energy into the team. Sometimes we found that team is a little bit disappointed, a little bit frustrated about
Mm.
whatever is happening in the daily work. So in order to get the team spirit up, there should be some people putting energy into the team and to bring the people again to work in the same direction and deliver job. So this is what
Mhm.
I call energy.
Yeah. I mean, definitely it requires energy more than a line a business role if you're looking at the corporate. What's one thing corporate people believe about consulting that's completely wrong?
I can talk about different perspectives. There's one thing is a lot of corporate people. I was consultant at one time, and that's when in China I walked into a client room, and he always told me that you consultants actually you just talk and you do the point, and then you create values. You ask for a consulting fees for the services. I think the perception is a little bit wrong because it stays at service level of what a consultant is doing. Of course, we have to communicate our ideas. Sometimes we have to sell our ideas and ideas that the company needs to transform. But behind the communication, if we are professional consultants, I think we come from this industry. We all know that we need to do a very factor-based approach, meaning that every recommendation we do is actually a day and night time to make this recommendation solid. So we have a lot of facts to support these recommendations. I think this is one thing that people perceive, but unfortunately, they are not in this industry, so it's not actually what's happening in the reality. That's the most important thing which marks in my consultant career.
Mm. So are you saying that having fact-based approach in mind, that's one of the reasons why many of the analysis in consulting take longer? This is not literally subjective analysis in one slide. And in
Yeah,
order to recover that fact, that data, it takes time. And you need to triangulate that fact from different perspectives to come up with a solution. And that's the time-consuming aspect. Is that what you're referring?
I think you made a very good summary, meaning that we need to triangulate the concept and also to prove or disapprove the concept, meaning that if we have one idea or one recommendation we should make to the client, then we always tested hypothesis is if we didn't make this recommendation, what happened? Then we have a more comprehensive view and we can make this recommendation to our clients. I think this is one of the most important things at being a strategic consultant. This is very professional and responsible to the clients.
Mm. If we look at this dynamic between corporates and clients and consultants, in your experience, where consultant overestimate their own value, is there any instance in your career that you thought consultants in your team overestimate their own value?
Yeah, there's a lot of story to tell. Maybe to answer your question, when I was younger, so being a consultant, that's very, let's call that a very decent job. So we all enjoy being a consultant, and overestimation comes from maybe the over self-confidence. We believe that we can change everything in this world. So sometimes we overestimate the result that we can deliver to the clients. Of course, we all say that we come from Roland Berger, so we have make some advertisement for Roland Berger. We see that we make impacts for the clients. So that's true. That's in every consultant mindset. But sometimes we know that we deliver a project, we make a recommendation afterwards for the implementation. Sometimes we are not there. And how this strategy is implemented in the real life and the impacts created depend on the implementation of our recommendations. So sometimes we believe that this is a pretty good idea. So everyone that we met in the project time is convinced about this idea and there's no issue that people will implement. But in a corporate, that's very complex dynamics. So once I get senior, I understand this point of view. And the other stuff is it's not about creating values or overestimation of creating values. That's why I laughed a little bit when I switched from the consulting industry to a consulting related industry that I'm doing like AI or starting my own company. I found that consultants have a very quick learning curve. So we enter in each new industry very easily. But there are so many things to learn, and consultant is not a perfect person. So when he starts his own business, he still need a lawyer to get recommended. He still need a very professional finance guy to do the financial sheets. So this is something that maybe I, being a consultant, overestimated my skills at that time.
You have a very interesting career, starting at corporate at PSA, jumping into Roland Berger, and being partner at Simon Kucher. I think that's a great track record for anyone going from corporate to consulting. And then this sort of what I call the gap that you just mentioned about how complex it will be to implement those recommendations. At what point you realized there is a gap between what consultant could recommend and what could actually be implemented in your client organization? At what stage in your consulting track where you realize that it's really harder than what you think to implement some of these strategies?
Yeah, I think you raise a very good question. From my personal perspective, it is not about my level of seniority. So let me frame the answer this way. When I was junior consultant, my stakeholder from the client were very simple. This is one or two guys from the team that I'm taking one module. So my interface is kind of limited. And when I get senior in the grade in consulting from project manager, senior project manager, or even in the partners, and we need to interface with a lot of stakeholders from the clients, I start to realize the thing is not so simple. The total project is very complex. And I started to understand within a corporate, they have the know-how of managing a company at a large scale. While being a consultant, we manage a team of 3 to 5 people. So it's very easy to align, or easier to align the point of view of 3 to 5 people rather than 2,000 people. When I get senior, I see a lot of different stakeholders. I interface with them and I perceive a lot of different perspectives. And each perspective we need to incorporate into our project to make it successful. And that's why what I said at the very beginning, that actually the communication and convince the people skills is very important to make sure that the project makes a real impact.
Based on your experience going through all these employers, Roland Berger, Simon Kucher, PSA, would you still advise someone to get into consulting?
Yeah, definitely. I think the consulting is really a good school. I learned a lot of things from the consulting industries. Even though the world is changing, that we say that AI is arriving and impacting consulting industry, but I still believe, as we talked before, a lawyer is a professional service guy to do the law related, or finance guy, a CFO, whatever. And the consultant, he is more like commercial business related guy. So I do see a lot of values still from the consulting, but the value we deliver might slightly be different from 10 or 15 years ago. But still, like 13 years of consulting industry experience, including my own consulting firms, I do see a couple of things that pop up and makes me a little bit different from people who are doing other industries. We tend to receive or more open to the new things because doing consulting, meaning that we need to understand the new business models more quickly rather than our clients or stay ahead of the industry. The second thing is we tend to think about information a couple of times rather than passively received information saying that, okay, I learned. In other words, might have this capability of criticism. The third, I think being a consultant, we still multi-talents on different industries or different sectors. We can switch the industries very easily, but the key thing is we are capable to abstract the common points from different industries. So basically, fundamental things is quite similar. It's just industry-wise, we have different verticals industries, so we do the business slightly differently. That's why when I talk with some AI product teams or entrepreneurs in China, and they told me a very good comment that I really appreciate. They told me that, hey, you are a consultant, we are AI product team. So you guys, you speak more the CXO languages than us. So you
Right.
need to help us to communicate within the
Mm.
whole organization why they need our AI solutions. While we are product team guy, we're tech guy, we're not good at that. So you see, that's a combination of all the skills that we talked. Like we know the whole organization, we meet stakeholders, we can align. We have the capabilities of aligning certain things in when it's possible.
Who
Yeah,
should not go into consulting?
who should not? That's a very, very good one. I can give you my perspective. Who should not? The first one is if one person wants to build things instead of consult clients, meaning that he has this ownership. He found this brilliant idea of doing business. So he should step into the business and he wants to build it. He should step directly into the business instead of consulting other people to do the business. You see my point? He can do the business, he can enjoy the profits instead of consulting other people too. Because the logic here is we consult people and we make other people successful. We make ourselves successful by making others successful. So if one person has the passion of building things and he found a very good business opportunities, he believes the idea might be relevant for XYZ. If he has energy to do the things, if he has the motivation of building things, he needs to run the business directly.
What I heard from you is like a builder mentality versus consulting mentality. If you have
Exactly.
that personality trait to build things from scratch and run it all the way through, that's the character for someone who build things. And then we have consulting. But then there might be other individuals that are not builder or not having consultant mentality. They might want to get into other roles, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with you because when I answer your question, I'm compare two things. But of course, if the guy wants to be an expert, of course, the being an expert in a very specific domain is a little bit contradictory about what we talked about, kind of transversal capabilities across different industries of consultant. In other words, I don't know if I frame it very correctly, is I always say that a consultant, he is a little bit risk averse. You see my point?
Yeah.
So in
Yeah.
other words, if the people is kind of, he didn't care about risk, he is okay to lose something and time, money, or whatever, but he wants to enjoy the return of these risk-taking initiatives. And of course, if I compare entrepreneur and being a consultant, he needs to run his own entrepreneurship.
Yeah, definitely. Consultant is like sharing recommendation, helping others to succeed. But when you are entrepreneur, you literally have a skin in the game. It's your business. So it's a different risk to reward dynamic when we comparing consulting with entrepreneurship.
Exactly.
But if we look back at consulting, my audience always asks me question about working at this company or that consulting firm. They are trying to understand what consulting company give us the fast track to get promotion. I would like to pick your brain on that topic. At these top firms that you have worked with, what actually gets people promoted that no one talks about?
You have always the most difficult question. I can only talk about my own experience. I work for Roland Berger, I work for Simon Kucher, they are German companies, and work for another
Mhm.
digital marketing consultancy from France. It's called Artifact. When I was a junior guy, being a Chinese in the French environment, we have the mindset of the guest. So it's not our hometown, it's not our country. So we need to be very polite to everything that we do. So we should not be aggressive. That's my parents and the people around me told me. So at that time, I was always doing my job correctly. I was not outperforming. I was doing my job correctly. And I do have some disappointment for one or two promotions during my cycles within Roland Berger in Paris or in Europe. So the same project manager told me that he said, you see, it's very important that you do a good job. That's the basics for all the consultants. So if you don't good job not correctly, you will not get the chance to be promoted. But it's very important also to let people know how good you are doing your job and how good your job will help them to do their job better. So he told me that it's very important to actually, before the promotional cycles, to get into touch with the mentor that we have. Basically, we all know that the mentor is in charge of our promotion, in charge of our consulting life within the firm. So we need to talk with our mentor that we express our wish of being promoted for this time. And we give some elements to the mentors, helping him to do the promotion pitch, let's say. So the second thing is he told me it's very important also to discuss with the partners. Then you see that's the mindset change because the partners for us, when I was a consultant, we have project manager, senior project manager, principal, and we have the partner. So you have 4 layers. And I came from the corporate. So it's very difficult for me to reach out to my N+4 to tell him I want to get promoted. While he told me in consulting, it's a very lean structure. Well, we can talk later. In AI should be leaner. but it's a very lean structure. And he told me that you should talk with him and tell him what you did good in the past 6 months, and you should always tell him your value proposition for him. I take my angle of being Chinese. I'm specialized in automotive, blah blah blah. And I think you see, he gave me the back scene of the promotion cycle, saying that there's this one who is defending our promotion. So this is the mentor. So it's very important to give him elements to prepare the pitch. And this is the other stakeholder who are voting for promotions. They are partners. So it's very important to rediscuss with the partners we work with. We are not asking people to discuss with every partner in the company, but at least the partner we work with, to let him know how we did our job and how we can help the company to grow. So it's the pitch, but that's very important. And it's even much important when I prepare my election for the partners for the next firm, Simon Kucher. So even important to discuss with different partners to align the interest. So it's all about preparation. And one thing I would say after my whole story is European people do better than us from this angle is we need always to express ourselves, to say explicitly that what we want and what we can do to prove that what we're asking, we deserve it.
So here, the question, when I think about your experience, let's say you need to literally lobby for your promotion. Is that correct?
Yeah,
You need to talk to your mentor, also seed the idea in the minds of your partner that I'm going to add this value and I have delivered this and that. So you seed the idea, and then there will be a promotion assessment or sort of election for the next round of promotion. And then they
exactly.
discuss this information that they have gathered from different sources, from the mentor, from other feedback reviews. And at the end, you gather all this information, partners decide for the promotion of consultant to the project manager. Even if you are a partner or you are aiming to become a partner, the other partner also vote whether you could join that table, right?
Exactly. Very good summary. Exactly.
So this is something that I totally agree. This is not really clear for many consultant or individuals that want to join consulting. But based on your experience, what's something that, let's say, consultants or consulting candidates obsess over that literally doesn't matter?
This is my own view. I don't know
Yeah,
if it's
definitely.
representative. From my own personal experience, it's not important that we work longer times per day, like 15 hours, 16 hours, 17 hours. It's not very important. The thing which is very important is if we create impacts for the clients and for the company, project is well delivered, client is happy, then we have the follow up, we have another chance in 6 months time, 1 year time, or whatever time that we get another project from the same client. So repeated purchase. So I think when we do the consulting for the clients, we say create impacts from our own individual. That's the similar story. So we need to create impacts for the people around us. And we need to create impacts for the company that we are working for. So the company we're working for, I think, is pretty straightforward, get more business. And for the people around us, I think it's very important to create impacts for the people around us. So I would say, being a junior consultant, do not spend excessive time on your work. It's very important to create impacts. So work smartly. And then being a senior people like project manager, don't get obsessed that your team should work from 9 to 10 or whatever, 9 to 9. It's very important to work smartly and to make sure that you create impacts for your team, meaning that does a team by working with you learn anything? Does the team improve themselves by working with a certain project manager? I think this is pretty important.
You framed impact in a relative form, impact for your team, impact for your client. Here we are talking about impact in a relative sense. I've also seen that. So we need to make sure how others, team, client, sees our effort, our work. And we should not approach work as a sort of something mathematical that we should be correct in the absolute way. Rather, it has to be relative in the eyes of recipient of our work, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
That's something that I usually work with, even individuals that are already in consulting and they want to promote that is something that stands out. I totally agree with that aspects. So with that, I would like to talk about this elephant in the room, which is AI.
Yeah.
So, if we just cut through the noise here, what part of consulting is actually at the risk from AI and what is not?
Yeah. Um, if we talk about the consulting business, we have the strategic consultants like McKinsey, BCG, or including Roland Berger. We have the consulting firms like Big Four, or we have consulting firms more specialized in IT consulting. One thing is pretty easy to see that all the consulting firms help the clients to manage business process. We provide consultants to help a clients to manage their business processes so that the client would not need specifically a department for that. These kind of consultants is kind of at risk because AI is doing pretty good at repeated tasks, especially with a kind of very clear and fixed workflow. And still, for the strategic consulting firms that we work for, I think there's still business for these kind of firms. Why? My point of view is current AI, the technology development, do not have what we talk about, these kind of vertical expertise. So once a consultant work for 6, 7, or 10 years in the consulting firms within a very specific industries, and he gets specialized, still the AI currently do not understand these 10 years of vertical experience. Today's AI is more like a very general model which can cover different industries. The second thing is if we think about within the consulting firm, let's take a Roland Berger like consulting firm.
Mhm.
Um, I would say that the current AI is kind of replacing or trying to replace part of the job the junior is doing today. We start from there. So you and me, we started from, we put the client notes in a very specific format that company asks us to put because it's very professional to always stay within the same format. We structure every our interviews within a very structured Excel sheet, and then we can follow easily. I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about. So
Yes.
all of these kind of repeated work is exactly what AI is good at. So all the market research stuff is kind of at risk of being replaced by AI. But still, what today for a consultant very important is we need kind of expertise for sure, but we need also from our expertise this I call judgment engineering, meaning that once AI provides the results, and the experienced clients should say that okay, this is true or this is not true. Otherwise, we need to redo the cost check. We need to provide a very professional recommendation to our clients. So we have to check the recommendation in 360. So if we don't have this kind of judgment capability, we need to check the result provided by AI. Sure that AI is saving time because checking the result provided by AI still take a lot of time. And he can generate so many recommendations in just so short period of time. We cannot run after the result judging delivered by AI. So we still need this kind of expertise to make sure that AI deliver the good results. So I think this is a challenge for a consultant or a traditional consultant and to learn in the future how to work with AI.
And is that your view on the top performer consultant to know about the latest tools and also be able to critically review and analyze the information that AI provide to us, right?
Yes. So he should be a kind of learn ahead of the industry. So learn a lot of new technologies, a lot of new tools. Maybe without tools, we use a very simple coding capabilities. We can do already great stuff. But still, a good consultant tomorrow should be able to judge the result delivered by AI and should have this capability of orchestrating. So let's say using multiple tools or different tools to deliver this project. Pretty important because it's not only about increasing the efficiency, it's also being put the real time of a very high skilled consultant to the right tasks, meaning that providing values to the client, think with the client about the recommendations, but not spend time to do a lot of deep research, which could be done easily by AI with some techniques.
You talked about creating that vertical expertise. A consultant after 7 or 10 years become vertically expert in one field. I want to know, what did you do early on in your consulting career that gave you that unfair advantage in the firm to climb to the partner level. Is there anything specific that you can share with us?
I think back to my career. I started with Roland Berger and then 2 years in Paris in Europe, and then come back to China for 3 years. And then I started with Simon Kucher to open the Shanghai office in 2018. I think being elected to a partner is great achievement. That's pretty difficult, even though I'm always saying that I was a little bit lucky at the time, because I opened office, so it's kind of reward to the work that I have done for helping the companies to open office. But well-established consulting firms, to get promoted to the partner, there are a couple of things I learned. One is consulting is marathon, it's not a sprint. So we need to have this mindset that it's long-term achievement. Being elected to partner is not tomorrow. It's kind of 7 to 10 years work. And it's not very important that we run more quickly than someone in our batch get promoted. We get promoted more quickly than the others. We are thinking about
Mm.
long term. So short term, 6 months is not very important. So that's the first thing. So I changed a little bit the mindset, saying that, okay, being consistent over time and always doing after 7 years, 10 years, doing the job as we did at the first day with a lot of energy, with a lot of passion. That's very important. So the second thing is being a partner to be commercially solid. A lot of clients, a lot of relationships to help the company to generate revenues. That's a hard fact, but still it requires soft skills, interfacing with the client, doing the BD, create needs, and then sell a project. After the project manager, principal, partner, the job requires a little bit more soft skills than hard skills. A partner,
Right,
rarely you see him join a slide.
right.
So commercially solid and require a little bit softer skills. And the third is the impacts that you create. When I was in Simon Kucher, the impacts meaning that, for example, the impacts we create for the team is very happy. The team wants to work with the company. So then people feel that we create this kind of traction or dynamic within the specific office. And secondly, create impacts for the colleagues and for the firm. We can think in the way, okay, that's the euros, that's the revenues, but impacts could also be other intangible things. Of course, it's very difficult to give a dollar to the intangible things, but still we take that into consideration. For example, the reward of opening office, the impacts of creating the brand within a specific market. For example, the impacts that we bring new leads, new business to existing colleagues, and we have this mindset of sharing and growing together. So I think that commercially that's very important again. But if we do the job correctly, there's still a lot of intangible things that we can looking for, and we create impacts. This is one of the very important key things when I was preparing the partner pitch
Mm.
presentation.
Right. And then here you're talking about something which is very human character. You're talking about impact, you're talking about softer skills. I think this is something that would not see AI could replace in the
Yeah.
coming years. So, having that in mind, are you worried about AI closing that gap between top performer and everybody else that they call themselves consultant or strategy consultant?
Yeah, that's a very good thinking angle. My perception of AI is two things. The first thing is that AI will lower the barrier of being a consultant, to be frank. I do see an ex McKinsey girl. She open sourced the McKinsey skills on the GitHub. So
Right.
we have the coding, then we can install the skills to every agent that we develop. And the
Mm.
agent will follow a kind of McKinsey methodology to analyze the specific market problems. So I think the AI tool will lower the barrier of being a consultant, especially the tech guys, which are not so consultant before. We see a lot of AI products saying that we will revolutionize the consulting industry, we will be the future competitor of McKinsey with AI. That is one thing. So lower the barrier. But still, I have a different view is AI tool will actually empower the high performing consultants. I'll give an example. I talked with a client in China and they say, hey, I need to have the DeepSeek. That was the most powerful model at the time. I was asking them that very simple question. So let's do a thinking experiment. So you have the DeepSeek, your competitor have the DeepSeek. So what's the difference of you having a DeepSeek? DeepSeek is open source. Everyone will have a DeepSeek. So thinking about that is the core competitiveness will not change for the specific client I talked with. So coming back to the consulting industry, I think the core skills of a good consultant, he will still stay there. As you say, we all know consulting industry. I cannot give a number, but I always say 20 to 30% is a kind of relationship with your clients, relationship with your colleagues, relationship with your mentors, with your partners. So this thing AI will very difficult to replace. And there's other thing like judgment. Tech people from Silicon Valley, they say we need to have the taste. So all of these things will not change. And the AI will only, as the example from the company, empower the people who were in the past still very good at these kind of things, teaching a client, selling an idea, managing very good dynamic from the team player. AI will only amplify this. So in my opinion, that it will create the gaps between the best performer and the not so good performers within the consulting firm. And
Okay.
again, coming back to the taste, just one last point. People always ask me, hey, what does it mean for taste? Because it's a word invented by Silicon Valley. I say the taste is very important. When I was a project manager, the taste is we can tell easily the slide is good or not. that's that's the taste I mentioned. So we always look into different slides and we can always say, hey, you need to change this, change that. So this is what I call taste. So AI will only amplify this because we know which slide will be appealing to the client and which idea will be appealing to the client.
That was really interesting topic. You mentioned that AI will help top performer to exceed or accelerate than the rest of the individual. So
Yeah,
it becomes their superpower. But if I dig deeper, you need to be in the trenches before you're able to
exactly.
use AI in a right way. So here we were talking
Exactly.
about consulting. You need to know the role or responsibility of a top tier consultant in order to be able to use all these available tools in the best way possible.
Very good point of view. I didn't mention, but you get it right for me. Thanks for your comments that we will talk about under the condition that the top performer can use correctly or know how to use the AI tool, right? But again, as you say, let's take the ex-McKinsey guy or a girl. She can draw these skills because she knows in McKinsey what kind of SOP to do a market research, right? So from the beginning, what kind of analysis, competitor analysis, how to do the competitor analysis. So she have done this that before, so that she can ask AI to help. Again, it's the same idea that we talked before that AI will not replace the consulting industry because we have this vertical expertise that we accumulated since a couple of years. And of course, if you ask me in the future, will AI develop a very specific AI consulting large language model? Then that's the future we can discuss afterwards. But if you ask me at the current stage, the expertise and vertical, AI cannot do that. One last thing, I have a lot of ideas. I don't know if it's the last thing because when you talk, you give me ideas. I agree with you that in the future, I don't think AI will replace the consulting industry, especially for the human aspects. Because in China, sometimes I heard that in Europe when I was studying a training program in Roland Berger, people told me in consulting it's not all about rational, it's about emotional. Sometimes we do the consulting job. It's not about people find the answer. It's they want someone to take responsibility of talking about the answer. You see my point? So it's what I call AI cannot be responsible. It's only a physical human, a consulting firm. He will be responsible by stamping on his logo on the paper saying that this is a recommendation given by Ronald Merger or McKinsey.
Yeah, because the report on its own doesn't have any value. If you look at the due diligence, if there is no project manager or partner who is willing to stand behind that report and give that
Exactly.
presentation to the board to buy or not buy this asset, nobody gonna look at that report. Even if you say that, okay, this is the same report that you could get from this company or that company at a fraction of price, nobody gonna value that report, even though it's
Exactly.
the same report, because you need someone who can talk through it, he can answer questions. You want to pressure test that report from different angle. If you as someone who received this report, you realize the logic makes sense. I tried to test this a consulting firm that did the due diligence and we couldn't poke a hole on this report. So this is a good asset to buy. Or if I'm a banker, I want to do the leverage buyout. And then you look at the report, you know that this firm has the bankable report And you go with that. But it will be really hard to replace that aspect that Claude has, that bankable stamp of generating due diligence. I know that in Sweden, there are a few firms trying to automate the due diligence, claiming that we're going to develop due diligence report. And their whole value proposition is built around creating that due diligence report for different buyers. But to me, it's really hard. It's not about the report. The data is abundant. You can gather data, but it's not about the report. You might be able to help the consultant that develop or generate those reports, but you will
Exactly.
replace the consultant because it doesn't work like that.
So when you talk about the startup projects of automating due diligence reports, I thought they might sell to the consulting firms, but they cannot sell to the end clients unless they take the part of the liability of being responsible to the result they deliver. And sometimes PE firms, they buy not only the report, but the people behind the report and also the company logo behind the report.
Yeah.
So there's a company called MERCOR, and they are hiring ex-McKinsey BCG bank consultants to train the large language models. So they ask consultants to get into a meeting room with AI, and then they should provide case studies to AI, and then the AI can learn from the past experience. So that's why I say currently we are still not there. In the future, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be. You can develop certain skills in the language models. You can improve those skills by giving on very specific tasks, like a slide development, like how to put the action title or the sources. You can train AI definitely. I've also talked about this topic in my two last videos. It's really hard to
Yes.
read the room. It is literally impossible because there are some elements that you need to use all your senses. This is not just the response from the client in a text format. You need to be in that room, look at what they say, the facial expression. Are they happy? Are they not? You need to ask question, why you feel that way? Are you okay? Should we work more on this or more on that? This is not something that literally AI can do.
And in the future, I agree with you that the consulting firms, as you said, should not be pyramid. It's kind of like a Dumbo, like you have a senior team, they feel the dynamics in the meeting rooms. And in the middle, maybe one senior PM or experienced PM who can do the judgment with the capability of managing a lot of agents and some junior people. And of course, junior people, they need to do the research with AI. They need to provide the feedbacks on the research works of AI. So the consulting firms, I think consulting firms will exist, continue to exist. It's still a good job if people want to learn, because I think it's only within consulting firms like McKinsey they developed a lot of agents for the human employees. And the third is, but we are requiring different skills from the traditional consulting. Like you and me, when we enter these consulting firms, people always say, hey, you need to be very rigorous. You need to do zero default. You need to do the market research in such way. You need to learn very quickly to read a lot of articles to make summaries. And I think we have different skills in the AI era.
So my last question here, do you have anyone in mind that I should talk in this space, consulting, AI, strategy, as my next guest on this show?
I think you can talk with Stephen Zhang. He is an ex-McKinsey. He worked also for Simon Kucher. And today he is entrepreneur in the AI products. He came from the consulting background, and now he take a more risk role of doing his own entrepreneurship. So you can talk with him to listen to his career change and background change and why he did this change. I think it will be very interesting and thoughtful to you and to the audience.
I'll make sure that to reach out to Stefan.
Thank you for your time.
That was a great chat going through your consulting background, AI, talking about the behind the scene. I totally appreciate the time. Thank you so much.